What you just heard is a bit of a soundbite is what you see on the streets of Delhi and Gurgaon every day, which is a crash, entry-exit driving, wrong side, screaming and shouting. But every one of us who drives in the streets of these two cities believes that they are in the right. And so if you were to question it, the normal answer, and I won't say it in Punjabi because that's what you'll hear, is what do you know about it? So let's talk about it a bit because it's critical at the cusp of the time that all of you are. And I'm a little unhappy that some of the brand heads aren't there, so we probably have to carry this message back. Today happens to be the 1st of October, and most hotels are used to have at least put their new rates into the market for this wonderful season that we wait for, which begins in October. And then another piece comes in January. All of us expect 65% of our total revenues to come in the last 6 months, and we work with 35 being a great excuse for the summer, and life goes on. Then we wait for what we call tailwinds, because we've all had experiences of this great economic tailwind that will come our way, and suddenly all our worries will be set right. Because, you know, Modi economics will bring us extra numbers, e-visas, we'll just have these great amount of travelers coming in, whether for business or for leisure, and our problems will get solved. But the reality, ladies and gentlemen, is that we are right now, all of us, staring at a bit of a precipice. The economic cycle doesn't seem to be showcasing any change in the near future as I see it. We've been waiting for it to change for 7 years, so I guess we'll get used to waiting probably another year. And if we continue to be standing in the same place that we are, then you're going to have two dissatisfied chapters in your life. One is, if you are running managed hotels, your owners aren't going to be very happy. They haven't been happy if you've been running their hotels for some years now, and they aren't going to be happy for the coming year as well. And you're not going to be very happy with the kind of rates that the market seems to depict. And on top of that, you've got all the friends and colleagues who've spoken during the day. I was watching the webcast. By the way, the webcast really works seamlessly. There was no buffering issues, so well done. And everybody talked about the value of the new aggregators and the value of the new disruptors and the business platform of the ODAs. But the point is, these guys are there to stay. And if they're there to stay and you want to make more money than you have before, and you want to keep your owners happier than you've done before, then you have a problem. So let's talk about the owner for a bit. We work with owners, particularly those of us who manage hotels for different brands, and we work with owners, and the guys who actually put in their hard-earned money, if it is hard-earned and not from nefarious sources, they put in their hard-earned money, so they're the owners. They put in those multiple crores of rupees on a promise brought to fore by the brand. So I'll tell you an interesting story. A brand took over a small chain in this country about a couple of years ago. And they made that, the set of owners spend a fair amount of money rebranding it to the new brand standards. Having said that, in the first year of the turnaround and now the second year, the numbers that the owners are doing are less than what they were doing on their own. And when they asked the brand the question to say, can you please explain? Because we were given some other numbers to work with. And the honest answer was, oh, but those projections were given to you as simulations by our development guys. They don't know the reality of the today's market. Now, if that's the kind of principle that we work with, you have a lot of upset owners. The second thing is that owners have either built their hotels on two platforms. One is what that owner thinks that hotel should look like. For us, it's our little palace that we've created for our community around us, our friends. Therefore, we have a different kind of pride. So the owners tend to build to their own wonderful specifications and normally spend a lot more than they should have. And then we as brands sometimes go in with a brand choice that doesn't fit that hotel. And the reality mismatch starts to happen. When that reality mismatch starts to happen, the owner is not going to get the fair return based on what he or she himself made or what we as management companies made him make. And we don't seem to see these interactions. We speak to a lot of owners. We don't seem to see these fair, honest interactions happening with the owner, which cautions them about the fact that our business is going to be cyclical. It is going to go through the natural demand cycle, sometimes longer, as we've gone through right now, and sometimes preferably shorter, as we used to do in the early 80s and 90s. And what would that mean in a weighted average for him on the kind of money he or she has spent? And therefore, what's the fair return that he could get before he takes that call? We hesitate to do that. Therefore, we put up flags where the chances of a consistent return coming are not really bright, but hey, I want to announce my flags. I want to announce my multiple deals. And we do this all the time. And uniquely, despite getting there, a lot of our demographics of the customer that certain brands do attract don't exist for the location that you may have branded. So the inflow cannot really come from the brand. Naturally, this mismatch is going to have a rather upset owner. But brands and management companies like ourselves, we complain about owners all the time. Oh, but they complain too much. They don't understand the reality of business. And a lot of them don't pay us in time, and we are not paid their fees because we haven't really generated enough funds for them to pay their interest and principal. But the other reason is that we need to understand that as much as we would like it, legal contracts in India are kind of enforceable the way any contract in India is. So you may have these 200-page documentation, 4 different kind of agreements, and the owner stops to pay you because he or she is unhappy. What you going to do? It's bad news for the brand to deflag. It's bad news for the brand to let go of the money owed to them. So you're therefore in a vortex. But the funny part is, we all know it is a vortex, particularly in our country where institutional investors are very small. REITs don't exist yet as they do in mature markets. Land prices contribute 40% to your project cost, which they don't internationally. Interest rates are 2.5 times what they cost internationally. But we don't seem to understand what are we really talking about. Who are we really talking to? Are we educating them on the possibilities of where this decision could really be inefficient for both of us? That's a question that you all need to answer for yourselves, saying, are we behaving like mature marketeers when we actually take on those bonds as a partnership? Therefore, today, what is happening is, as much as we as hoteliers would like to see better revenues and better rates, guess who wants the same thing? The owner. But then you hear examples of certain owners who sit in hotel lobbies, and when they see a transaction breaking down, and I'm sure my colleagues here would know which hotels I'm talking about, a transaction breaking down, and you have the owner getting up from the sofa in the lounge and killing the assistant manager or the manager on duty for letting it go. And so the operator is saying, listen, I'm not going to underprice myself beyond a price. And he says, are you paying the interest or am I? I need the cash flow. So who's defining your business? Your business in public forum is being decided by the owner, who's right now in financial trouble and therefore is working his cash flow. But what is it damaging? One, it's damaging a relationship. But the second thing is, it is damaging your own brand. You are allowing that to hope. So one, your contract's not tight enough on what their roles are, what your roles are. 2, you haven't explained the dichotomies that you're going to face. 3 is that you're allowing that to happen. 4, you don't have a contract that you're going to really sign on and actually get your money back. So what's the answer? The answer actually lies within yourselves. We heard a lot about bar rates. We heard a lot about the impact of OTAs and aggregators and how Delhi is a massacre. It's murder in that city. It is. It is true. It is. Because over the last 3-4 years, supply has gone up on an average by about 15-odd%. But 15-odd% on a very low base. But you know something? Demand also went up on that total supply by almost 12%. So you really have a demand-supply mismatch of something like less than 3%. Not bad odds to fight in the market with, right? You're never going to get it right. You're never going to work to your advantage. And the better players will always win because they should have the distribution bandwidth to do so. But they don't. And why don't they? So some of you may have attended a convention which is done by the Crow Howarth in January. It's called Hi-Fi. The gentlemen and ladies from STR do a whole projection of what's happening in various regions along with our own country. And Vijay Thakur, who's the head of STR Crow Howarth in India, actually made a very challenging statement that really resounded but didn't showcase results. And he actually pointed out to all the leading brands and said, the way you guys have run your rates and your RevPARs in the last 3-4 years, we're all going to go down this cliff. But if the leading brands, if they wish to call themselves leaders, if they wish to be called leaders in the world of tomorrow, they've got to lead by finding the right price for their own hotels. Because if they do, the next stage players will. And so this price change will effectively cascade as a benefit down. But if the leading brands don't, then how can the mid-scale brand do the same? How can the economy hotel do the same? Who also, different from the leading brands, has to fight on the ground with every standalone owner who is now getting flagged as an Oyo Rooms. An Oyo Rooms model, like you correctly pointed out, Nikhil, is about giving a deal, and whatever is your loss on the deal, really, they commit rooms, they take a quota, they pay a price. But that's not the yield they get from the customer, but that is treated as marketing expenditure. If you and I deal with the OTAs, a lot of you have a B2B rate, a lot of you have a B2C rate, and hello, here's a rate at 12 o'clock at night, like the lady mentioned, which says 1,500 rupees cash back per night. Now, where is that 1,500 rupees cash back per night going to come from? It's coming from their marketing fund. It's coming from their valuation. It's coming from their cash. If that is the market that you're competing with, then ladies and gentlemen, put a price to your value. Put a price and value to your destination. Find out how, through your own loyalty initiatives and through your own websites and distribution models, the right price for yourselves, because you've still got to pay your bills. We seem to have suddenly got happy with GOPs which are sub 20%, sub 25%. At that rate, if you own your own hotels, you aren't making too much money. In fact, you're struggling. But at that rate, your owners are losing money hand over fist because they're giving you working capital. It isn't going to go that way unless you gird your loins, get together. You can't even get together officially because you're all scared, saying competition commission is going to kill us. But if competition commissions were to kill us, then the airlines would have lost business a long time ago. But they all find the right price value to the customer, whether corporate, whether travel, whether leisure, whether online, and they can put a flag to what their needs are. If I talk to our partners in other brands, last year we asked them, we said, how do you see the rate increase happening in October, November? What do you think the answer was? Oh, 5 to 7%. We asked them again this time, how do you see a price increase come up? Hallelujah. The answer was, well, somewhere around 4 to 6%, everybody's struggling. But if that's the case, if you take a flight, the flight's full. If that's the case, on a lot of days, the price that is being paid for the flight is 20,000 rupees, when normally it's 5. That means there is money to be made. If any one of you ladies and gentlemen were to go to a tier 2 or a tier 3 city and speak to a standalone owner, he knows what basic price he wants. And sometimes we get shocked. He's not willing to give you a room for less than 4,500 rupees because he runs the business the way he understands his business. He knows his yields, he works backwards on his yields, he works backwards in cost. There was a session on cost in the morning. He knows where to bottom out. We as an industry seem to have forgotten that piece. That is what we were taught with. This is a bottomless pit, and the only advantage that you're giving by responding in that manner instead of being proactive and understanding what you're doing is letting the advantage go, one, to the customer, which is good for the customer because we all are in some ways outside of our own brands, or to the OTA, or to the aggregator, or to the company who also, hallelujah, used to pay you in 1 month's time, now pays you in 90 days' time or 120 days' time because they just happen to be a Fortune 500 company. But they don't pay you in time too, so you're carrying that whole load onto yourself. So my only advice to all of you is, one, whether you want to keep your owners happy because they like this language, but more so if you're doing the right thing to your brand, and if your brand has been positioned correctly in your location, is to find the right price value, competitively engage with yourselves, and stay with that value. If your service standards and value for money is correct, the customer will pay you for that. But if you compete with somebody else bottoming him out, the only loser is us, the loser is nobody else. That's all I want to say. I leave the floor open for questions. If you have any, would love to interact with anybody who wants.
You know, exposition, I think you must have been a great debater in your school and college days. Yeah, absolutely. But you know, we heard at Hixa, we heard at every forum, we hear these big brands, you know, and they're worldwide brands. They come and keep complaining about the owners, you know, that's become the biggest bugbear. Do you think it'll ever end? I mean, you've of course given a strategy for them, but will they accept a strategy that is more rooted to the Indian context? You know
something, it's a subject that is being taught at Cornell University. It's an actual subject that has been taught at Cornell for, I think, the last 7 to 8 years. Why is that? Internationally, it was the same as we find ourselves today. It's not new. Internationally, up to a couple of decades ago, owners were individuals, and individuals have their own special dimensions on how they want things to work. Fortunately, internationally, a lot of the ownerships have moved to structured corporate ownerships, as I said, institutional, REIT structures, asset managers are there who explain the business. They are the interplay between the brand and the owner, therefore understand the two business platform. Like you would have maybe have a Vijay Thakur or a Manav being your interplay in the middle who can actually balance the two things out. It's a very nascent thing in India. And also in our case, owners, well, they fund their hotels from all kinds of sources. Some of them just want the money conversion. Some of them don't. But for all of them, they want to be the best. They want to be earning the maximum. Nothing wrong with it. The business is about earning money. But if you don't pre-educate and keep mobilizing and modulating this interaction, this is something that we're going to have to live with. Because everybody is different as a human being. And they're individuals. They're not a corporate entity. And that's what you have to fight.
I just want to go back to your point about you'd mentioned as far as brands are concerned, right? You've got to maintain a certain price, let's say. This is the image of the brand. I think you'd mentioned that a few minutes ago. I sometimes find that, and I'd love your comments on this, I think in India, and partly it's because I think our market is very lopsided in terms of the organized market. It's changing, but luxury, it's sort of tipped in favor of luxury, right? So a lot of the thinking comes out of luxury. A lot of that thinking comes out of your alma mater, Oberoi, for example, which is clearly a market leader. And there's this concern around running the business for business and protecting the brand, right? So it's not about, I've got a room, my marginal cost of the room is 500 rupees a night. 501 is a good price to sell if it's my last room, right? Somehow I don't see that thinking over here. I see it in every other market in the world, actually. A lot more, except for maybe a very small sliver of luxury hotels around the world who can afford not to do it, right? Who perhaps owned by a sultan somewhere. But other than that, I see a lot more rate flexibility than I see in India. I'd love your comments on that and why that is.
So fair. You've got a fair point there, but just like Louis Vuitton once told me, we don't discount, we just do flash package sales. To everything that has a price value relationship, You may be quite right in saying 501 and 1 is my additional cash flow. But at the end of the day, the market dynamics don't allow you to do business at that additional 1 rupee. It can only be transactional for certain troughs in time. And people do that. I'm not saying don't take it away. If you have an empty hotel, then you have an empty hotel. But you've got to find the point where it stops making long-term money. So let me counter you on that one. Most people say, but your running cost of a room is 500 rupees. Let's presume you're right. But at the end of 4 years, what's your cost of refurb that you haven't taken into that account? Because you will have to change a lot of things in your room. Have you taken that averaging of that spend before you set up that price? So we've done this exercise multiple number of times, and we find we know what the aggregate price should be, and therefore we shouldn't be selling it under that price, because it doesn't make any business sense. You're going to be handle your cash flow today, but you're going to be out of pocket tomorrow. So you've got to know that dimension to answer that.
Just one pushback. I think unlike Louis Vuitton, right?
No, Louis Vuitton was an Oberoi comparison as an example. So.
I think the point about it is I think hotel rooms are more comparable to airline seats, right? So once tonight expires, tonight's not coming
Sure.
back, right? And it's exactly the same as a plane. And I think that's where I'm coming from, which is absolutely in periods of demand, low demand, right? Or in periods where you've got rooms available, it's still better to have a rupee than not have that rupee.
So which is what I said, you need to understand which rupee.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when I said, is it 500 or is it actually 1750, once you've got that dimension answer, should you therefore be comfortable in a trough period selling at 1800? That's your call. But you've got to understand, and plus, different from an airline business, all about you need to fly, therefore you'll go there, okay? And at that time, you may not have a competitive. Here you can have competition from just anybody at certain various rate points. Therefore, it's unaffordable. So you have to find that balance. I'm not saying there is no balance. Of course there is. And that's why mid-market hotels a lot of times are doing better ROCEs than the luxury hotel and upscale hotels are, because they have found certain modulations on it.
We have time just for one last question.
Just the last one.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that there is between the price and demand, when you were talking about Delhi, it was only a 3% gap. And you also mentioned because airline seats,
No, this was the pan-India number that I gave.
Pan-India, even better. And then you mentioned that the airlines people are willing to pay, and you go to smaller cities and you see load factors doing better. So it's not the Indian customer that you're saying doesn't have the money to pay. It's just the way that the hotels, firstly the hotels don't come together, as you said, which won't happen. So what's the next advice to hoteliers to break out of this?
So what I would say actually is exactly as Nikhil said. You need to know your cost relationships, you need to know your yield relationships, and then find how many peak days and shoulder dates you go to service with which kind of relationship. Okay, and then stick by it, because that's your business model.
Yes.
Okay, but if you keep flitting with wanting to battle Oyo rooms on the same day, and on the next day if you think you can be battling the upscale or otherwise, then you're actually killing the market in its whole set, because even the customer really doesn't understand what you're doing.
Right.
And therefore gives him the availability of being able to demand a price dynamic without really understand where your value is coming from. You've got to be very clear on your value. That's what I said.
Thank you so much, sir. It
Thank you very
indeed
much.
was very engrossing to listen to your address. It was really enriching, and we would like